The night everything began was quiet on the surface but heavy underneath, like the city itself was holding its breath, and Lily could feel it as she stood near the window of her small apartment, looking down at the wet road where yellow lights reflected on the rain. Lily was not a powerful woman, not rich, not famous, just a schoolteacher who believed that if you worked honestly and lived kindly, life would return the same to you, but real life had taught her a painful lesson. Her husband Daniel had died 3 months ago in a factory accident that everyone knew should never have happened, a machine that had been broken for weeks suddenly crushing him during a late shift, and while the official report called it unfortunate, Lily knew the truth because Daniel had warned her again and again that safety rules were ignored and complaints were silenced. The factory belonged to the Mafia boss, a man whose name people whispered rather than spoke, a man who smiled in public and destroyed lives quietly behind closed doors. Lily had cried, begged, and waited for justice, but nothing came, only cold letters and closed doors, until one evening she received a message telling her to come to the boss's office if she wanted answers. Fear walked with her the entire way, but something stronger than fear pushed her forward, a need to speak, a need to be heard, a need to honor the man she had lost. Grace, her closest friend since childhood, insisted on going with her, her face serious and protective, while Ava, a journalist known for chasing difficult truths, joined them after hearing Lily's story and sensing something deeper beneath it. The boss's office was high above the city, wide glass windows showing power and distance, and when Lily entered, she felt small but refused to bow her head. The Mafia boss sat behind a large desk, calm, confident, dressed perfectly, as if nothing in the world could touch him, and he listened as Lily spoke about Daniel, about warnings. Daniel, about warnings, about lives treated as numbers. When she finished, the room felt heavy, and instead of anger or apology, the boss only smiled, a slow smile that felt colder than the rain outside. Lily's hands were shaking, but her voice did not break when she said, "God will take revenge for every wrong done to me," because she truly believed that even if people failed, something greater would see the truth. That was when the Mafia boss leaned back and replied, almost casually, "He is my man," as if faith itself answered to him. In that moment, Lily felt shock move through her like ice, not just because of the words, but because of how deeply broken the world could be when power mocked belief and suffering. Grace tightened her grip on Lily's arm, and Ava watched closely, understanding that this sentence alone revealed the boss's greatest weakness, his belief that he was untouchable. Lily left the office feeling both defeated and awakened, realizing that justice would not come easily, but also realizing that silence was exactly what men like him depended on. As they stepped back into the rain, Lily understood that real-life battles do not start with loud fights or dramatic moments, but with quiet courage, with one person deciding not to accept lies anymore, and although fear still lived in her chest, something new had joined it, a steady strength that told her this was only the beginning, not the end. After that night, life did not return to normal for Lily, because once you look directly at power and hear it laugh at pain, you cannot forget it, and every sound in the city began to feel different to her, sharper and more alert. She went back to teaching children during the day, smiling in front of them, correcting notebooks, explaining simple lessons, but inside her mind the boss's words kept repeating again and again, "He is my man," and each time she heard them in her head, her heart burned with a mix of fear and determination. Grace stayed close to her like a shadow, calling her every morning and night, bringing food, sitting silently when words were not enough, because Grace had seen too many injured people in the hospital to believe that accidents were always accidents. Ava, on the other hand, moved like a restless wind, asking questions, visiting old factory workers, drinking cheap tea with tired men who had broken hands and weak lungs, slowly earning their trust. Real life was not kind to whistleblowers, and many workers were afraid, but Ava did not push, she listened, and listening itself became powerful. Lily struggled with doubt during those days, wondering if she had made a mistake by speaking up, because strange cars appeared near her building and unknown numbers called her phone and stayed silent on the other end, but every time fear tried to pull her back, she remembered Daniel's tired smile and his last promise that one day things would change. Grace reminded her that courage does not mean the absence of fear, it means walking forward while fear walks beside you. Ava discovered old reports hidden deep in government offices, reports that showed safety inspections had failed the factory again and again, only to be approved later with fake signatures, and although the Mafia boss's name never appeared directly, his influence was everywhere like invisible fingerprints. One evening, Ava shared these findings with Lily and Grace in Lily's small kitchen, the air thick with tension and hope, and Lily realized something important, that her pain was not lonely, that many families had suffered quietly for years, believing they were alone when they were not. That night, Lily prayed again, not asking God to punish anyone, but asking for strength to do what was right, even if the road became darker. The next morning, a former factory guard knocked on Ava's door, shaking and nervous, saying he could not sleep anymore because of what he had seen and what he had helped hide. And this moment felt like the first crack in a very strong wall. The Mafia boss, meanwhile, sensed movement around him, whispers that did not stop when he entered rooms, glances that lasted too long, and for the first time in years, he felt irritation instead of control. He ordered his men to warn Ava gently, not violently, because violence attracted attention, and attention was dangerous, but Ava only smiled when she noticed she was being followed, because she knew that meant the story was real. Lily felt guilt for putting her friends at risk, but they refused to step back, reminding her that real-life change never comes without cost. Slowly, quietly, like water wearing down stone, truth began to spread, not loudly, not proudly, but steadily, and Lily understood that the boss's greatest mistake was believing everyone could be bought or broken, because he had never counted on ordinary people holding on to honesty when it mattered most. As the weeks passed, Lily began to notice a change in the city, not a loud change, but a quiet one, like the slow shift of weather before a storm. People who had once avoided her on the street now looked at her with a different expression, a mix of sympathy and courage, as if her bravery had reminded them of their own buried pain. Grace kept encouraging Lily, telling her that her husband's death had not been in vain, and that the truth was starting to spread like a small fire in dry grass. Ava's articles were no longer just stories, they were becoming a movement. She wrote about the factory's unsafe conditions, about the bribed inspectors, and about the families who were suffering in silence. She did not name the Mafia boss directly, but she described the pattern of control so clearly that everyone who knew the truth understood who was behind it. The city's police force began to feel pressure, not only from the people but from their own conscience, and for the first time, a few honest officers started asking questions openly. They visited the factory again, this time without the usual fear, and they saw things that had been hidden for years, broken safety gates, malfunctioning machines, and a pile of documents that showed bribes had been paid to keep the factory running despite the danger. Lily wanted to stay out of it, she wanted to return to her normal life and pretend she was not involved, but the reality was that she had already crossed the line, and there was no turning back. One night, as she returned home, she saw a small crowd gathered near the factory gate, families holding candles, their faces tired but determined. Grace had organized them, and Lily stood beside her, feeling a strange sense of unity that she had never experienced before. People shared their stories, crying openly for the first time, and the sound of their grief felt like a prayer. Ava recorded everything, knowing that the world needed to see the faces behind the numbers. The Mafia boss watched all of this from a distance, furious but careful, because he knew that a direct attack would make him look guilty. He called his men and told them to increase pressure on the families, to scare them into silence, but the families did not retreat. Instead, they became stronger, because they realized that the Mafia boss's real power came from fear, and once fear was gone, he was just a man behind a desk. Lily began to understand the true meaning of her own words from the first night, God will take revenge for every wrong done to me. She realized that God's revenge was not always a punishment, sometimes it was the awakening of truth, the awakening of people who had forgotten their own strength. Her faith was not blind anymore, it was active. The city was changing, slowly, but change was happening, and the Mafia boss's smile was beginning to fade because he could feel the ground beneath him shaking. This was real life, not a movie, and real life did not always give you a perfect ending. But it did give you moments like this, moments when ordinary people stood up and refused to be controlled any longer. The tension grew stronger every day, like a rope pulled tighter and tighter until it threatened to snap, and Lily felt that snap coming closer with every breath she took. The city was no longer quiet about the factory, and the pressure had reached a level where even the Mafia boss's most loyal men began to hesitate. It was not just the families or the articles, it was the feeling that the world was watching now. The police had started investigating more seriously, and this time they did not ignore the signs. A few corrupt officers were quietly removed, and a special investigation team was formed. Lily watched this unfold with a strange mix of relief and fear, because she knew that once the investigation became real, the Mafia boss would try to protect himself in any way he could. Ava continued to publish her stories, but she also started sharing the hidden details with the investigators, giving them evidence that could not be denied. She took risks every day, but she never showed fear, because she understood that fear was exactly what the Mafia boss wanted. Grace, who had always been strong in the background, began speaking openly in public gatherings, telling people about her patients who had suffered because of the unsafe factory, and her voice carried a truth that no article could match. Lily, meanwhile, found herself becoming a symbol without wanting to be one. People began calling her a brave widow, a voice of justice, and she hated that title because she did not feel brave. She felt broken, but she also felt something else, an unshakable determination to finish what she had started. Then, one day, the boss's world began to crack in a way he never expected. One of his trusted men, a man who had worked with him for years, came to Lily secretly and confessed everything. He said he could not live with the guilt anymore. And he handed over documents that showed direct orders from the boss to ignore safety violations and to silence workers. Lily's hands shook as she read the papers, but she also felt a strange sense of peace, because finally, there was proof. The investigation team now had enough evidence to arrest the Mafia boss, and the city held its breath as the day of the arrest approached. When the police finally came, it was early morning, quiet and careful, because they knew the boss would try to resist. Lily stood outside her apartment with Grace and Ava, watching the police cars arrive, and her heart beat so loudly she thought everyone could hear it. The boss was taken into custody, and for the first time, his face showed fear. His smile was gone, replaced by anger and confusion, and he looked smaller than Lily had ever seen him. The courtroom was crowded with people, and Lily sat in the back, watching as the truth was spoken out loud. The boss's lawyers tried to twist everything, but the evidence was strong, and the witnesses were brave. The verdict was not immediate, and the case was not simple, but the world had changed. Lily did not feel revenge or joy, she felt relief, because the suffering had been recognized, and the truth had been heard. When the judge announced the sentence, Lily's eyes filled with tears, but she did not cry loudly. She simply whispered a prayer of thanks. She understood now that God's revenge was not about punishment alone, it was about justice, about truth, and about the power of ordinary people to stand up against those who think they are untouchable. As Lily, Grace, and Ava walked out of the courtroom into the bright sunlight, the city felt different. It was still the same city, with its noise and its problems, but something inside it had shifted. People had learned that they could not be controlled by fear forever, and Lily realized that her husband's death had sparked a change that would not end with one verdict.